Why am I out here at a high school football field with a 200mm f2 lens? I'm making things incredibly difficult for myself today. We've got harsh lighting, I've got an incredibly long lens, of course I gotta shoot at f2. Am I going to be able to come up with a good portrait? Let's see. We have a few different sponsors and a few different pieces of gear here. I'm going to talk about them as I'm using them throughout this photo shoot, but I'm probably not going to get back to the bag again, so I want to definitely talk about this at least for a second. Manfrotto is supplying us with both this roller bag and the 190 tripod. This is the ProLite Reloader Air 55 roller bag, and this is a small enough bag that it will fit in the overhead bin if you're used to traveling a lot. And my wife actually just brought this to me from Puerto Rico. You're gonna see in a second, it's filled with extremely expensive gear. I like the fact that they put the locks on the side. So I told Katie, go ahead and lock that bag up. If you're gonna be traveling with all this stuff, put that lock to use. But I have to say, when it comes to a roller bag, there's just a few things that I care about. I want it to be well made. Obviously, I don't want anything to rip, but I want the wheels to feel nice. I want them to roll nice and smoothly. And then when I open it up, I want it to make sense. I want there to be enough room for all of my gear. And luckily with this bag, I think you have plenty of room here, and they give you so many extra dividers. I don't have those with me today. I left them back at the studio. If you're the type of photographer that wants to customize this bag and get everything to fit exactly, you're gonna love this thing. One other feature that I like now that I see it, I've never seen it in another bag before, is the fact that it has these cables or bungee cords here that hold the top up and open. So when I open this, I can actually see all of the gear. I don't have anything in these pouches right now, but I know with some of our other bags, if we have one of these unzipped and we open it up and it falls down backwards, everything falls out. That's not gonna happen with this bag. So let's quickly look at the other gear that we're going to be using today. I have two Profoto B10s. These are like the most awesome strobe and hot light I've ever used. For a camera, I've got the Fujifilm X-T3. This is an amazing video camera and still camera. It's great for sports, but today we're actually gonna be using it for kind of a sports portrait hybrid. Now let's look at the king of this shoot, the Fujinon 200mm f2 lens. This is one of the most expensive lenses I have ever held in my hand at $5,800, but this thing feels like it should cost $6,000. Now keep in mind, we're going to be shooting on an APS-C camera. This means that this lens will act like a 300mm 2.8 full frame equivalent. So who is this lens for? I've got to admit, it's not a portrait lens. I mean, this is a professional sports/wildlife photography lens. And basically, you pretty much have to be a professional photographer to want to afford something like this, or you have to be a very serious amateur to spend almost $6,000 on a lens. But I've been playing around with this lens, and I have to tell you, it is incredible. The image quality out of this thing is absolutely amazing. The images are super sharp, and of course, when you get really far away from your subject and you shoot at f2, you're going to get incredible shallow depth of field with beautiful bokeh in the background. Now, initially the plan was for me to get this lens and then shoot a live sporting event, but I was afraid that shooting a live sporting event, I'm not gonna be able to talk about that much. It's a lot of anticipation, waiting for the right moment and everything, and we've done videos like that in the past. Instead of shooting a live event, I'm going to be shooting a portrait of a football player. Let's meet him. All right, everybody, this is Steve. He's a local football player. And Steve is going to be our model for today. And to be perfectly honest, I'm gonna be making this up as we go along. I think I'm gonna be doing more of a standard portrait. I don't think I'm gonna be doing action shots, but we'll kind of see where this leads us. I don't know. So I think the first thing that I need to figure out is exactly where I'm going to be shooting. You can go ahead and just relax for a second. I'm gonna walk around here and see if I can find a cool spot.
Gotcha.
Thank you. So I gotta be honest with you guys, this is pretty tough to find a place to shoot around here. First of all, we're in an open field. We have the harsh sun that's sometimes coming out and then other times it's going behind clouds. It's a little bit cloudy today. But the main issue that I'm running into here is that this is a super telephoto lens. Basically, it's a 300mm equivalent. And so whatever I take a photograph of, I am only going to see the smallest little sliver of it. I've been doing some test shots, and if I get a correct exposure on my subject, the dark trees that we have around here go really, really dark. And then if I want to add strobe, I'm going to have to lower my exposure a little bit, and that's going to make the trees even darker, almost black. So I don't know that that's going to work. Now, a reason why a lens like this is so valuable in sports or wildlife photography is twofold. First of all, Photographers love that shallow depth of field. If you're shooting, say, a football player on a field and there's people all over the field and then we have people in the stands behind them, you want to have that super shallow depth of field to cut them out and make them the center of focus. On the other hand, if you're shooting something that's moving really quickly, like a football player or perhaps a bird, you want to shoot at a really fast shutter speed. You're able to do that by stopping down to f2. You're able to allow more light into the camera, which allows you to shoot at those really fast shutter speeds. By shooting at f2, I'm getting incredibly shallow depth of field. And so obvious things to you that might look good behind a football player, like the scoreboard or the goalpost, just look like a blurry mess of colors in the background. So not only can I not shoot towards the woods, and I can't shoot towards the scoreboard, and I can't shoot towards the goalpost, and then over here we have houses, that wouldn't really make any sense. It's really limiting what I can shoot towards. So over here we have some interesting stands, and of course, you know, it'd probably be better if they were filled with people, but I'm shooting at such a shallow depth of field that I'm not even sure you'd be able to tell if there were people in the stands or not. It's just kind of, once again, a blurry mess. So I don't really care if you can tell what the background is per se. I just want there to be an interesting background that's a correct exposure with my foreground and subject. So after doing a few test shots with Steve, I really think the stands over here are probably our best bet, at least to begin with. So let's figure out our composition and start over here. Let me take a test shot real quick of Steve right in front of these stands here. And I don't love the composition, but let me just show you guys what this looks like. Now, one thing that I'm using right now, because he doesn't have his helmet on, is the face detection autofocus, and it is amazing. It is just automatically finding his eye, focusing right on his eye for me. And it's working great. Now keep in mind that if you were actually shooting a football game or you were shooting, you know, wildlife photography, you're probably gonna wanna move to a single point autofocus that tracks, or maybe zone autofocus. You can move that around with your thumb as you're shooting. I'm going to have to switch over to that once he puts the helmet on, but I have to say, it's incredibly useful right now while I'm just doing test shots. Now, if you look at this shot, I feel like we have a pretty interesting background. You can see those diagonal lines in the background, but I think the angle at which I'm shooting, with all of that grass that's cutting through the back of his thighs, and then you can see the track behind that, I just feel like I could make this a little bit more interesting. I might move over a little bit, and I might get the camera a little bit lower to the ground as well to shoot up at him a little bit more. Let's give it a try. All right, so I've moved over a little bit, I've changed the background, but I'm still shooting almost at eye level, and I don't like the way the ground looks behind Steve. I feel like if I get a little bit lower, I can shoot up at him. I'll see a little bit of grass, but I think I'll get a more industrial looking background. Let's see what it looks like. So I think this looks a lot better. I think he looks a little bit more epic and strong because we're shooting from a lower angle up at him. I also like the way the background looks a lot more, but as you can tell, we got kind of a boring looking natural lit shot here. I think we can do a lot better by adding in some light. Now we have our next issue, and that is lighting someone out in the open in the middle of the day. As you guys know, the maximum sync speed for most cameras is around 1/200th of a second. I am currently shooting at 1/2000th of a second to get a correct exposure, and that's because I'm wanting to shoot at f2. Keep in mind, that's an extremely wide open aperture. It's allowing a ton of light to enter the camera. I have the camera set all the way to the lowest ISO, which is 80 for the X-T3 here, and still a correct exposure is 1/2000th of a second. If we were to shoot at 1/2000th of a second right now with a standard strobe light, the shutter in the camera would actually cast a shadow from that strobe light entering the camera, and you're gonna get these bars of light across your scene, so that's not going to work. What I'm going to have to do is shoot in high speed sync mode. Now, a lot of flashes today allow you to do this, but keep in mind that you have to have a specialized remote that can communicate with the camera to pull this off. Now, keep in mind, if you're just going to be doing standard flash photography and you want to manually control the light, any one of these remotes, if it has the standard mount, will work on any camera. But if you want to have that automatic TTL control so that this remote itself will determine the output of the light, Or if you want to go into high-speed sync mode, you're going to have the appropriate remote for the camera you're using. And on the back of each one of these remotes, it will tell you what this is for. It says for Fujifilm right here. Now I'm going to turn this on and turn the sync dial. I can set it to first, second curtain, or high S. I'm going to set it to high S. Let's go ahead and set up our light. Now, as we are filming this, the sun keeps going behind clouds and then popping back out. Right now, it's very cloudy. But my plan for this shoot is to use this as our key light and then use the sun or the shady sky as our fill light. I'm adding the reflector dish to this Profoto B10, and I'm hoping this is just gonna give us a little bit more power and focus the light directly on Steve here. I'm gonna go ahead and raise this up. I have it set to level 7. It goes all the way up to 10. That should give me 3 stops to play with. And of course, from the remote, I can change that over a distance. So I'm not too worried about that. Steve, go ahead and put that helmet on for me. So in these shots, you can see I'm just adding a little bit of light. I don't want it to look too stroby, but I feel like the light is coming too on axis from the camera. I think it looks a little boring. So I think if we shoot the light from this angle rather than over here, we're going to be able to see some shadows that it's casting in the camera. Once you start bringing the light around and it's on the same axis as the camera, it starts looking like direct flash. It starts being really boring. So I think this is a lot more interesting. Obviously we don't have light hitting his entire body, but I think that's what makes this fun to look at. What's interesting is that even though Steve has his helmet on, I haven't turned off face detection, and it's still detecting his face even with the helmet, which is pretty incredible. One feature that's really cool on this camera is it has a bi-directional tilt screen. So normally you shoot horizontal, it's gonna tilt like any other tilt screen, but it's got this button on the bottom that you can press and it will tilt up. So if you're taking a vertical shot like this, it works really well. Now we've got some really faint lighting going on here, but I think it looks nice having the rim light from behind. I'm going to add one more B10 on the opposite side. Again, it's not going to make a huge difference, but I think it's just adding a little bit of interest to the shot. Now I'm going to put both of these lights on channel 1. My key light's going to be A, and then this one I'm going to set to B. I have to be honest, a lot of times when I'm doing a normal photo shoot, I don't worry about doing this. I just keep them all the same and I'll just go over manually and change each light. I'm not doing that today because my camera is so far away. I am not walking back here every time I have to change these lights independently of one another. Now, if you were shooting a live sporting event, you'd probably be shooting with a monopod and not a tripod. The nice thing about shooting with a lens that's this fast and shooting outside like this is that I could shoot handheld. Well, I mean, we're shooting at 1/2000th of a second right now, and here comes the rain. I need to get this shot really quickly. At least both the camera and lens are weather sealed. And I'm probably gonna go back to this just so I can keep everything the same. So, this is a good reason to always bring a lens hood with you. I don't think we brought a lens hood. And our $6,000 lens is getting very wet right now. Okay, so I don't know if you want to step back just a little bit. I'm gonna go 3, 2, 1, and I just want you to like power forward. You can take like 1 or 2 steps. 3, 2, 1. And let me go ahead and get you to back up just a little bit, and I just want you to run through. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1, go. Awesome. Start this way for me just a little bit. Yep, right there. 3, 2, 1, go. The focus on this lens is crazy. It's like a telescope. I mean, I can hardly even tell what's going on over there. But you zoom in and you can see every little detail of the shot, even at f2. So for these last few shots, I switched over from a single shot autofocus, which means it's going to lock focus and then take the shot, over to continuous autofocus. The other thing that I would probably do if I wasn't shooting with strobe lights is I would turn this onto continuous high shooting. This camera is actually capable of shooting up to 30 frames a second, which is absolutely ridiculous. I'm trying to just get one shot at a time because we're using strobe. This camera also has a sports finder mode, and what it basically does is crops in a little bit, but allows you to see the outside of the frame. So if somebody is about to run through the frame or into your shot, it helps you anticipate the shot a little bit earlier. So I've gotten some standard portraits of Steve. I've gotten some shots of Steve running towards the camera. I think these look okay, a little generic to me. I'm gonna get some shots where he's moving across the plane of view here, perpendicular to the camera, and I'm gonna light him so that he's running in towards that key light, and then I'm gonna use the light on the opposite side of him as a kicker on his back. I'm getting even lower to the ground here, just to try to create a more interesting angle. There's a little hill right here, and I feel like by hiding his feet, I don't know, I like the composition a little bit more. 3, 2, 1. I'm setting the camera now to low shooting speed, and I am just holding this down as he's running through my shot here. I might move to I'm gonna move to a horizontal image too. All right, let's test out the tracking feature. I'm gonna lock this onto him, and as he runs, oh yeah, it is holding on. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Have you ever tried to handhold a 300mm equivalent lens before? It is tough. 3, 2, 1. Now, I wasn't planning on doing this, but because we have him here, I'm gonna get him to jump a few times, just act like he's catching an interception or something like that. Let's see how these turn out. 3, 2, 1. That's it, we'll do one more. 3, 2, 1. All right, we've gotten some decent shots. I'm gonna move into a portrait style shot now. And once again, I know this is crazy with a 200 f2, but I'm gonna get Steve to sit on a bench, and let's see if we can come up with something interesting there. I think I'm gonna swap out this dish for a softbox. Let me grab that. Now for this first shot, I'm gonna cut this light off completely, and we're just gonna be using the one softbox. I don't wanna overpower this scene. It starts looking really cheesy when you do that. I just want a little bit of light. Now the sun is starting to go down, it's getting a lot darker outside. We no longer have to shoot in high-speed sync mode because I'm getting a correct exposure at 1/250th of a second, which is the fastest sync speed for this camera. Now, a lot of people think that if you shoot in high-speed sync mode, you're actually getting more power out of your flash, but in reality, you're losing about 2 stops of power by using that feature. Keep in mind that high-speed sync allows you to get shallower depth of field and bright ambient light, but it does not actually give you more flash power. So by dropping out of high-speed sync mode, I'm able to get more power now. Keep in mind, I don't need it, but if I want to conserve battery life, this is going to help a lot. Let me get you to turn towards the light and look over your shoulder at me. So turn your, yeah, not quite that far. Perfect, perfect. So our settings have changed drastically throughout this shoot. Earlier in the day, I was able to shoot at 1/2000th to 1/4000th of a second at ISO 80, f2. Now, because the sun's gotten so much darker, I'm at 1/250th of a second, ISO 200, still shooting at f2. I think we've gotten some nice portraits. These look like, you know, your standard senior portrait style photographs. But I'm glad that we got to play with both high-speed sync and standard sync here. Now keep in mind, we had complete control over this photo shoot, and I think our shots are okay, but obviously nothing is a world-class photograph by any means. Imagine how much more difficult it would be if you had no control. You're just a photographer on the sideline, hoping to capture something that's happening live right in front of you. It's all about getting the right camera, having everything set perfectly. You need to understand how the autofocus works on the camera. You need to have a camera that can shoot multiple frames a second. A lens like this is going to be a huge help. You're going to be able to shoot at f2, which allows you to shoot at a really fast shutter speed, which will allow you to get super sharp images while at the same time being able to separate your subject from the background with that shallow depth of field. So now that I've gotten a variety of shots, let's head into post and pick out our favorite. All right guys, welcome back to post-processing. The final sponsor for today's video is AlienSkin's exposure software. If you guys have seen any of our other tutorials that we've done recently, we've been using AlienSkin's exposure exclusively to edit all of the photos. In case you guys don't know what it is, in the past, it was basically a way to add preset looks to your images that would replicate film. And it has become so much more recently. It, in many cases, is a complete replacement for Lightroom at this point. They've also introduced layers, which might make it a replacement for Photoshop as well. You can do skin retouching and stuff like that in this software too. So basically, if you're looking to cull, edit, and give your images a look, definitely check out AlienSkin's Exposure X4. Of course, like any good software, it's 100% free to try, so head over to the link in the description. And if you do decide to buy it, use the link below and you can save some money. So the first thing that I'm going to do is cull down these shots and pick out my favorite. I'm gonna go through each image and give it a rating 1 through 5 by hitting 1 through 5 on the number pad. That is going to create a star rating on the images. Give me just a second and we'll meet back and I'll show you what I do after that. So at this point, I've gone through, I've rated every single image, and if I want to filter just the images I've rated, I could click here on 1 star, and that's going to show me anything that I rated 1 star and above. I'm going to click on 3 stars and above, and then I'm going to go through these images one more time and pick my absolute favorites. I'm going to rate my favorites a 5. All right, at this point, I've narrowed it down to 3 different images to edit. One where he was running towards the camera, one where he was running perpendicular to the camera, and then one where he was sitting on the bench. Now, keep in mind that exposure can be a Photoshop plugin or a Lightroom plugin. I actually have it opened completely independently of any other program, and these are raw files that we're working with here. And so if I go over on the right side, I can change all of these sliders just like I would in Lightroom or in Adobe Bridge, and I can change this raw file however we see fit. So I don't want to change too much here and give this image a look yet, because we will be going over and giving it a look on the left panel, but I just want to make sure that my overall exposure is correct, my white balance is correct, and once we have all of that dialed in, then we can go on the left side and give it a look, and then we'll come back over to the right and fine tune it. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Let's head over to the left side and pick a preset to start from. Now, I know that I want this to be a color image, so I'm just gonna go ahead and click on color. That's only going to show me the color options, and then we can expand each one of these, and we can just mouse over to see all of these different effects. Now, just to do something completely different, I feel like it would be cool for this first shot to look kind of like a old school football card, you know, that the kids used to collect 20 years ago or whatever. And there are tons of different vintage looks in here. Some of them have scratches, some of them have a bunch of added grain. Others have frames around the outside that kind of make them look like a football card. So I think I'm liking the look of color photo under the color films age tab. And if you cycle the before and after up here, you can see just how significant this is. The nice greens that we have behind him turn into this really cool dark brown color. Now, a lot of these effects are really heavy-handed, and you may feel like, I would like it, but it's just too much. You can change that. Up in the upper right-hand corner under layers, under opacity, we can just lower the opacity. So at 0, this is what it looked like before. And then as we raise the opacity, we are raising this effect. I feel like right around 81 looks pretty good. Now, again, on the right-hand panel, under the color tab here, what we can do is we can change the individual hue, saturation, and luminance of each individual color. Now, I could come in here and I could start messing with individual color sliders. For instance, if I wanted to change the hue of the grass, this is probably in the yellow and green channel. And you can see I can push this and I can make it totally different. I can make it red or whatever. Let me zero that back out. What I like to do is click on this little arrow in the upper right-hand corner and then pick a color and then I can drag up and down and it will change just that color. So if I wanted to change this guy's skin, I could change just his skin. And to undo that, I'm just gonna hit Control Z, and basically that is the fastest way to pinpoint individual colors and change details about those colors. Now we just changed the hue of the green color, but if I wanted to change the saturation, let's say I wanted to boost this color that we have in the grass, I could grab this saturation arrow here, click on the green, and then boost this up. I don't think that looks great, but I just wanted to show you guys that's how you can do it. All right, let's minimize this color tab and slide down to overlays. And let's add a border here. Now, if we click on this little arrow, you can see it will open up a panel with all of the different frames here. There's so many different options to choose from, and then once we pick one that we like, we can fine tune that frame as well. So I'm really digging these film borders. Obviously, you know, I don't think I'd do this to a portfolio image, but I feel like for this shot it works. And if you were doing something like a senior portrait, and you wanted to add effects to images that you print or maybe show up in some sort of album, I feel like this could work. So I am going to choose, let's go with film number 2. Now there's a few more things under overlay that we can add as well. We could add a lighting effect to this. And once again, if you click this arrow, it will open up all of these different lighting effects. I might add one, but I definitely want it to be pretty faint. It's like running through a black hole. That could work. So I've chosen one called Dusty Flare 1. So I've chosen Dusty Flare 1, and we can move it around and place it wherever we want. And then if it's too much, we simply lower the opacity. Like that looks pretty cool. And then under texture, same kind of deal, but we can add dust and scratches and crushed jade, and there's just so many different options here. I'm going to choose Scratches 9, and once again, just play with the opacity. I just want to have a hint of these scratches in the shot. All right, I feel like that looks pretty good. Let's move on to the next image. All right, in this shot, we've got Steve running perpendicular to the camera. I feel like we got some decent lighting. He looks pretty cool. He's obviously got an intense look on his face, but we've got a jogger in the background. I do not know if this is gonna work, but let's see. Now, I don't know how this is gonna work, but let's see how exposure does with the spot heel brush on a huge portion of this image here. So I am going to just click and start drawing on this guy. And I am hoping that because it's a really blurry background, it's not gonna have to do a great job. Here we go, moment of truth. It's actually not bad at all. So it picked a pretty intelligent spot on its own. I am just moving it around to see if I can find anything any better. I'm gonna hide everything here. Close, but not exactly right. So that is looking pretty good. Very good, very good. Just a couple little spots at this point that I feel like we could hide just a little bit. Now, I know a few of you are going, oh, Lee, that doesn't even look good. I can see some duplication and stuff. I think you can because you saw me do it, but I don't think any normal person seeing this image for the first time would ever be able to guess that there was a guy back there. And only took a few seconds. That's my type of editing. Now, the other odd thing about this image is that I've got this white pole or something. I don't know if this was the scoreboard or a sign or something back here. I don't really like that. So I'm gonna click on the crop tool here, and I'm just gonna crop into this image a little bit. I feel like it might be a little overexposed, so let me just play with my overall exposure here. I'm just gonna recover some of those highlights. And once again, let's go over to the panel on the left and find a look. So I really like aspects of what the Fuji Velvia 50 is doing to this image, and I hate other aspects. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna choose this look, but then I'm going to go through and fine tune it. Now, the first issue I have is I feel like it's just a little too contrasty, but I can easily fix that myself. So I'm just gonna remove some of the contrast from this image. I feel like that looks pretty good. Now, I love the colors of the background of this image, but I feel like the green grass in the foreground is too saturated, and I also feel like his skin is too saturated. But like I showed you in the last image, if we open up this color panel here, I'm going to click on the arrow under saturation. I'm going to pick the greens of this grass and just lower it a little bit. I like some saturation, I just don't want it to be crazy. Now I'm going to grab his skin tone and do the exact same thing. You can see I can make it black and white if I want to. But I think somewhere in there looks perfect. Now I think the last thing that I'm going to do to this image is scroll down to vignette, and I'm just going to add a slight vignette. Obviously that is way too much. I'm gonna change the shape of the vignette, make it more of an oval shape. I think something like that looks pretty good. And once again, we can go up here and click before in the upper left. Big difference, I think it looks great. All right, for this final image, I feel like it's just kind of a boring shot overall, especially compared to, a football player running or something. So let's do something a little bit more extreme to this image to make it a little bit more exciting. First of all, I'm gonna mess with the overall exposure. I feel like I want it to be a somewhat dark image, but at the same time, this feels a little underexposed. Now, I think there is a person here underneath his leg. Let's see what we can do with that. I know one thing that we could do is we could go to the color panel here, and I could grab the saturation and grab this red color and just lower that. And I'm gonna grab this other red color and lower that. I think that helps a lot. But then we've got this like white orb down here. Let me just see if I can grab that with the spot healing brush. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Let's add an effect. So I'm gonna do something a little bit different. I'm going to choose this one that creates really dark blue magenta tones in this image. You can see the before and after here, pretty significant. Obviously, I feel like it's a little heavy-handed, so I'm gonna once again go up to the opacity and just tone it down a little bit. All right, I'm now going to slide down to the overlay panel. And let's add a lighting effect here. I feel like corner 9 looks all right. I can change the size of it, how much it enters the frame, and then I can change the opacity as well. Next up, I'm just gonna crop in a little bit on this shot. And let's add a slight vignette. And then overall, if we feel like, maybe this image is a little dark or whatever, we can still go back to our standard basic sliders up here. And we can push this shot. All right, so I think that wraps up this edit. As you can see, 3 completely different looking shots where we went really heavy-handed on the editing. Now, would I go this far if I was shooting a standard sports game? Absolutely not. I think most sports photography has a more realistic standard look to it. However, if you want to take things, to this extreme, or you want to take images that maybe aren't that exciting and really give them a look or a mood, this is how you can do it. Once again, big thanks to all of the sponsors for making this video possible. If you're interested in this software, head over to the description. You can learn about Alien Skins, Exposure X4, as well as all of the other gear that we use for this photo shoot. And if you're interested in buying the software, you can even save some money with a coupon code. For more content just like this, head over to fstoppers.com. And if you'd like to check out our full-length photography tutorials, head over to fstoppers.com/store.